I am thrilled to bring up our first of many amazing guests. The role of the federal CIO is a vital one, making critical decisions about the nation's infrastructure. So please give a very warm Forward 50 welcome to our first speaker of 2021, Catherine Luello, Canada's new CIO, to talk about striking a balance between technology and humanity as we move into this digital realm.
Appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here today. Je suis très heureux d'être ici aujourd'hui. So you said to try things you're uncomfortable with. As you can tell, I'm learning French. So that was me leading from the front a little bit there. As Alistair noted, I'm the new Chief Information Officer of Canada, and I'm joining you today from Montreal. And I would like to thank the First Nations who have occupied and frequented this territory for millennia for welcoming us to their traditional or ancestral lands. Also want to just have a quick thank you to Rebecca, Alistair, and the Forward 50 team for inviting me to speak here today. I'm just rolling around 90 days, and so it's really exciting for me to have the opportunity to spend some time with you today. And they've done just a great job of making Forward 50 one of the premier tech events, not just in Canada, but as Alistair noted, internationally. The attendees that he was walking through during his opening comments were pretty impressive. I looked over the agenda for the event that you're about to go through, transforming to digital, security, cyber, inclusion, accessibility, AI, tech and ethics, economic recovery, digital, really exciting, meaty topics. And love the way that you framed that, Alistair, around the use of technology to make society better and the civilization stack. So I hope I can kick us off this morning, and it looks like it's going to be a great event. So I joined, as I said, about 90 days ago in July. So I'm brand new to government. So sitting with a number of folks that have worked in government for many years, I am just humbled by the service that you have provided to our country, particularly over the last 20 months as we've maneuvered through COVID globally. So for that, I give you a huge thank you. And I was motivated to join this mission because I felt like there was something I could contribute after working 30 years in private sector. And I've worked for many organizations across Canada. I've worked in energy, I've worked in telecom, and I've actually worked for both of the large airlines in Canada. So I've sort of seen global and local businesses. I feel like those roles have been training me for this environment because nothing has the scope and the potential of the Government of Canada, in my opinion, most important place to work in the country right now. I feel really excited about being the Chief Information Officer, but there is a lot to do. That's been my big observation over the last number of days. Big challenge ahead of us. I get to work with the people who run the systems that run our country. But as many critical systems in Canada, we've got some old and in some cases underperforming systems. They're at the end of their life, they're underfunded, they're complex, and they have high impact on Canadians and the federal public service if they fail. So part of the role, as we're talking about digital, and I've seen in the agenda, how do we do agile? How do we transform? It's appreciating the fact that many of us operate in an environment where we are dealing with systems that are antiquated and old and need to be thoughtfully moved off of. And part of the job that I think is really important, in addition to transforming, is ensuring that these systems remain reliable, effective, and safe. And you heard Alistair talk a little bit about the risk we all run around cybersecurity. We just can't afford to fail. Canadians rely on the critical services that the Government of Canada provides. What is kind of cool to me, though, is COVID, not being cool, but COVID has provided, from a technology perspective, clarity on what's important. And I wanted to just take a moment and just give a enormous shout out to Minister Murray. who is now our Minister of Fisheries and Oceans, and was serving as our Minister of Digital Government. She did a brilliant job of pulling together all the pieces within government and setting a strong foundation for digital. I spoke with Minister Murray after she was appointed into her new role, and it gave me so much excitement because Minister Murray said, well, now Fisheries and Oceans is going to go digital. So what I'm pleased about with the move away from a digital minister is that it really does send the message that we needed to incubate digital within government, but now it becomes all ministers' jobs, all of government's jobs. And that to me is the opportunity to build off of some of the things that we delivered during COVID, the wonderful baseline work that Minister Murray set for government, and now we begin to get the whole system to think about digital, both in terms of safe, secure, reliable services, but also in terms of how we transform work. So let's talk about that for a second. Digital government. It's about using data, information, and technology to support the safe, secure, and reliable implementation of our programs and our policies. And policies eventually turn into code. Fundamentally, though, it's about changing how we work and providing great services to Canadians and Canadian businesses. And my private sector experience working in high service industries, that is at the core of what I want to bring into this role within government. And as you know, it's not just about the tech, it's about the humans. And it's about transforming how those two things come together to change work, particularly in a post-pandemic world. I giggled a little bit with Alistair's pictures of those three girls sitting together and, him hoping for a day when they get up and actually go to each other's houses. I think that was a picture of my 19-year-old daughter there and sitting with all of her friends with their noses down, talking to each other on, Snapchat or whatever app they're working on. And that really is becoming both the opportunity in terms of what people expect and the challenge in terms of, this generation that's growing up with their faces in screens, particularly given the amount of online schooling, et cetera, that's gone on during COVID. Talked a little bit already about balancing the needs of our legacy systems. And I don't want to I want to underscore that. Like the reality is getting from here to there, there's incremental steps we can take. There's breakout steps we can take. There's things that we can do to optimize data. But the reality is we do need to deal with these aging systems and always keep the needs of Canadians at the heart of everything we do, both in terms of our effectiveness of program delivery, but designing with the user in mind. It's this internal and external collaboration of thinking about both inside government and those we serve that leads to better products and services. And we need to communicate the things that we're seeing, the risks and the challenges and the opportunities to do things better, smarter, and together. And we've done this. Like when you look at the pandemic and what it's allowed us to do, I work for an airline during the pandemic, and the things that occurred in that industry in a very short amount of time as they began to close borders, and we brought Canadians back to Canada from all over the world. We brought down flying. We had safety in mind. We still needed to move cargo. Technology was at the edge of that. It enabled that, and I saw that right across government. We want to provide services that continue to capitalize on that. I want to talk, and I'm going to go a little off script here, so Alistair, forgive me, but we do talk about humans. And part of making sure we're focusing on making sure that we are doing the right things for Canadians is also making sure that we're doing the right thing for our own team. And if you've had a look at my bio at all, one of the things that's important to me is mental health. And part of as we think about working and building the digital future, not just for the government, but for Canada, statistics show 25% of us here today are going through some type of mental health struggle. And that may be you, or that may be somebody in your circle. As a single mom with two great children and serving on the board of the CAMH Foundation, it's something that I'm passionate about, and I use every opportunity that I have to speak to talk about the fact that there is lots of resources available to folks around mental health, and I'm absolutely pleased by the amount of effort that the Government of Canada is putting into it. Closing statements, and I'll pass it back to Alistair from Q&A. I couldn't be more excited. My brain is happy on Friday afternoons, sitting and thinking about the problems and the opportunities that I get to be part of solving as the CIO of Canada. And I just encourage everyone to use these next 3 days to connect, to share ideas. You know, someone said to me at the beginning of this pandemic, no innovation happens online like this. It only happens in rooms. Well, watch us go. We've innovated like crazy during COVID. And I'm excited to see what comes out of our this event. Thank you very much for allowing me to share my comments with you today. And Alistair, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And it's weird to say we haven't actually met in person. Forward 50 came about when one of your predecessors, Alex Benet, lamented the end of GTEC and said, we really need a way to have conversations like this. Yeah. So it's great to see you picking up the torch, and I'm thrilled that we were able to get you to kick this off today. First, I got to ask, what's with the surfboard?
Okay, as a Western Canadian who transplanted to Montreal, when I worked for the airline out there, one of the fun things that a single mom would do on the weekend when her kids were at her dad's was hop on a plane and go to Hawaii and surf for the weekend. So that's a real surfboard. I can't surf on it anymore, though. I use the really long boards now, but it makes me happy to see it there.
I think, the backdrops we have are now our bumper stickers in COVID.
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
exactly.
Really love the introduction. One of the things that I've been thrilled about throughout Forward 50 is how civilized and sort of professional the relationship and the balance between the public and the private sector is. And it's really something that has come up a lot because obviously there are tremendous initiatives around open source, but there are also tremendous value and innovation. We have a session in the industry innovations track later on with 4 startups, some bigger, some smaller, who are really innovating, but having to navigate the sometimes Byzantine procurement processes of government to bring new things into government. You've joined this after, as you mentioned, a role in the private sector, and governments are by far the largest of the tech buyers out there. So what are your thoughts on the best way to balance buying technology versus creating it within government, and sort of that obviously has a whole talent aspect to it as well. But yeah, how do you think about what the government needs to own in tech and what the government should be better off getting from the private sector?
Yeah, Alistair, it's a great question. And I come in with a bias of, for things that everyone else does, let's be standard. For things that are unique to us, let's really test ourselves that they're really unique before we go ahead and build something ourselves. Because as we all know, as technology leaders, customization is the gift that continues to give for the life of the system. So I am a fierce advocate. When we talk about digital being changing ways of working, there are reasons why software as a service and some of the products that are now available to us are great at their business processes, and we should really question whether or not we are that special and need to do something unique. Now, certainly in the government environment, we have things around security and protected and all of that, but I think working with our partners to ensure that we can adapt them enough to allow us to work with them without breaking them. So I think we need to be really cautious around that. And then picking the things that are really truly unique to government that we must do ourselves. You noted talent. That is probably one of the biggest challenges both private and public sector have right now. And my hope is that I'll tell you, I'm loving this. There is no better career than coming and solving the cool problems that we have to solve in government. And I really hope that we begin to get a better spin through private and public sector within Canada to really create a training ground for people to lift just the overall technology bandwidth of the country from a talent perspective. So, and I think being less customized and more using solutions that actually can run businesses and adapting our processes increases the utility of doing that.
Yeah, I think that's something we often don't think about. We think about we build the legislation and then we say, go create it, rather than saying, hey, is this the best legislation to implement based on what's available in technology? And certainly Laure Lucchesi from France, who's going to be speaking later in the week, told me she embedded nerds with ministers for several months with huge success, because the nerd would say to the minister after the meeting, oh, by the way, you should ask for this instead of that, because it'll take a week to implement instead of 4 years. We don't have that kind of
100%.
insight, and it seems like a great idea.
Yeah, I'm so enthusiastic about that. And when I said, Minister Murray set a baseline, and now this becomes everybody's job, we should not be looking at a policy change, a legislative change, a regulation addition without saying, how do we automate that? And I've begun those conversations with a number of my deputy colleagues. So you are spot on with that.
Two other things I want to touch on in the time that we have. First of all, digital identity. When I get a form, I fill it out. The person who made the form decides what it's about and how I'm going to use it. When I get something interactive, that form can suggest courses of actions, recommendations. Hey, did you know you also qualify for these benefits? That kind of stuff. But none of that works until we know who the person is and what they're authorized to do. So digital identity makes it really hard to deliver services, and it's necessary, but there's been a ton of prevarication, partly because of the nature of Canadian Federation, but around the world, this is a big issue. COVID passports have foreshadowed just how hard it is to get people on board with some form of identification. How do we break the logjam of getting digital identity in a way that makes those services easier and more turnkey and more accessible? Because people seem to be happy to log in with Google or Facebook or Twitter or whatever for single sign-on when they have no recourse and no accountability to a bunch of foreign shareholders, but they're unwilling to sign in with their own government who they elect and have some at least recourse to. How do we break that logjam?
Yeah, Alistair, you've raised a whole bunch of great points there. And I would say one of the markers I want to lay down early is we've got to sort this out for Canadians, period, end stop. This is one of my emerging top priorities of the things that need to happen in the next horizon of work. So you think about sort of a transformation journey as chapters in a book. This is chapter one. This has to happen. It's the foundation for everything else. Second thing I would say is vaccine credentials are a great example of where, although it took some time, that we were able to get provinces and territories to work collaboratively around doing a consistent thing for Canadians. Now, we're still on a bit of an evolution path there, but for me, that's like the coalition of the willing. And I've had the opportunity to chat with a number of the CIOs from the provinces, and this is the time, this is the moment that if we provide strong leadership, I think we can really move the dial on this. And, you raise a great point. When I think about my work at Air Canada, we put in a foundational piece of technology around identity for a lot of the reasons you've talked about. And I'm not suggesting Canada is as easy as Air Canada by any stretch of the imagination, but getting Canadians to a point where they've got trust and comfort in a common digital ID that they can attach many credentials to, including a vaccination credential. That is a big part of, it's not just about putting the technology in, but it is in the what's in it for me as a Canadian to participate in this and give me comfort that you're going to take care of me. And I talked earlier about safe, secure, reliable. Those are foundational elements to ensuring that not just putting it in, but the fact that Canadians feel great value in using that.
Awesome. Last question, but it's a big one. I'm a huge fan of analytics and transparency, and we have a number of conversations going on. In fact, we have this async panel right now where different public servants and private sector people are debating the topic of how do we restore trust in democracy. Democratic trust and trust in public institutions is at an all-time low. Edelman's survey of the trust index shows that it's way down. It seems like transparency and accountability and analytics are a huge way of providing that trust, giving people an idea of what's actually happening. So what role does the federal government's information technology play in showing analytics and dashboards to better communicate to the denizens of Canada and the constituents of the country what value the government is delivering so that we can essentially restore that kind of trust?
Yeah, it is a big question, but mindful of time, I'll give you maybe a bit of a crisper answer. So one of the parts of the organization that I have the privilege to support is open government. And that is very much the focus of the work that we're doing within the open government team, and open by design. So you think about security as by design, privacy by design, open by design is another kind of tenet. I think, to your point, AI and analytics AI, all of those tools provide interesting ways for us to create visualization for Canadians. I've been on the Canada.ca website. I've looked for things both as a Canadian and now as the CIO of Canada. And I think everyone can agree we've got lots of room for improvement there, not just in terms of the information that people maybe don't feel that is as open as it should be, but even the information that we've got on the website, making it more appealing, accessible, and easy to digest. Data is just that, it's data, but what does it mean? So, when you think about the chapters of transformation, getting a foundation in place around data classification within the government, and really looking at that helps us not only with open government, but it helps us with zero trust, it helps us with security, it helps us with a lot of the other things that we're going to want to look to do. So big area of focus, and to your point, not an easy problem to solve. So, and a big part of that is cultural. So I think, digital's got a huge cultural point, open's got a big cultural point. So a big part of the role that I see myself playing is not just about guiding technology direction, but actually helping with some of the culture change that needs to happen within the government to have that translate to Canadians in a bit of a different way than it is right now.
Thank you. Well, it's unfortunately all the time we have for now, but hopefully we get to meet in person, especially if you're in Montreal. We should have had you just come by Ottman House and say hello. So I'm sure we'll catch up in person sometime soon, but thank you so much for taking on this role. It's great to see people heeding the call of public service after having worked in private industry as you have. So thank you for being here, and best of luck with the coming months.
All right, very good. Thanks for having me today, and merci beaucoup. Au revoir.
Alors...